Elliot was talking a lot about supply chains, and one word that really stood out to me when he was talking was this idea of mutuality, of workers and businesses actually working together, because we are working in a traditional heritage industry. So much when we hear about jobs, it's this new green economy, but we actually have like the infrastructure of a heritage economy that I think we have to be sure, as we're thinking about new jobs, that we're also thinking about the greening of traditional jobs, because it can allow us to accelerate more quickly because the infrastructure is there. What we have to do is be able to creatively understand, how do we disrupt some of that? How do we change some of that? And how do we add new products or processes to the market that are greener, but that can actually use this infrastructural base that we already have? And I do think, again, we were really honored to be part of one of these NSF engines, because I think what they recognized in us was this other word we've been using, which is an ecosystem, because so much of what we need to be able to be done is a hyper-localized approach to transformation that can transform a region, but then also be replicated in other areas. And so, we're lucky in that we still have one of the largest concentrations of textile workers in the US. And it's a struggle because a lot of that work continues. Like, as I was growing up here, we lost a lot of that work. We had one of the highest job losses in the country. And that work still continues to trickle out, because in this conversation, it's not just about creating new jobs. We also need to do a lot of work around educating consumers so that the products they buy and the resources they buy are also reflected in the ability to create these green jobs and hold them here in a localized place, particularly in places that are often underdeveloped, like the rural South and Appalachia. So that's some of the challenges that we're looking at. But before I was on this conversation, I was just at a really fascinating plant, and I ran over so I could be sure I got on time to this. But it was so interesting because, going back to this idea that Elliot was talking about of mutuality, is the companies that will be able to stay here are the ones that are looking forward into new markets. And those new markets are often driven by sustainability. So I think we are starting to get to consumers, or consumers are at least asking around, I want a product that I know has a climate positive solution attached to it. So what we're really seeing is this interesting partnership between companies that are looking for young workers and really trying to create and evolve in new sustainable markets, and younger workers coming in saying, I want purpose in my job. And we feel like that is actually a really interesting combination to be able to retain workers by having purpose, but then also having strong markets so that those are high quality jobs that we're creating. A lot of the work in textiles needs to be pushed. We need to raise the floor on a lot of these jobs. So I want to really kind of lift back up this idea of mutuality, of companies appreciating workers, and really also helping them, give them purpose by taking these heritage industries and driving forward new sustainable practices, both within the plants and in product production as well. I think, again, I just want to emphasize, like, green jobs. We need to be able to move quickly. And I think that's why it is so important we re-identify these areas where infrastructure is already strong, and we can identify the gaps of where we can move forward with infrastructure. And then one other thing Elliot said that I want to pick up on is this idea of networks. And you naturally have that within a place like ours, where you have an ecosystem or you have a supply chain. We often like to rename supply chains as value chains, because ultimately what we need to do is rebrand our supply chains as people that are sharing values. We talk a lot in our region about co-opetition. Where are we filling out problems together? Where might we be, moving more through competition? But a lot of what we need to be able to do is create best practice in these regional areas, in industries, and through infrastructure and through supply chains to solve some of these problems. And one of those is certainly bringing in new talented workers. Any other questions on that one? Because I have a question for Anshuman. Would that be good? So a million jobs, like, I'm working on holding on some of our jobs in our ecosystem. A lot of what our jobs are about are like retaining jobs, and retaining the jobs here in a new kind of innovative way. But I'm so intrigued by like your ability to think about transforming this number of jobs and putting over 100 million people into climate opportunities, particularly as you think about this gap between identifying skills and providing transfer of skill transferability. So one of my questions is, similar to regional organizations like the Industrial Commons, we're grappling with this challenge of attracting and retaining local talent, but we're also trying to showcase this opportunity in green jobs in our industry and our sector. So how do you envision Tara's approach in helping us address these issues like we're also addressing in our ecosystem? And specifically, what types of tools or strategies do you have in mind for helping to bridge some of the gaps that you're trying to address?
Thank you, Molly, for that question. So first of all, just a big fan of what you're doing at the Industrial Commons. I think the incredible ambition of that approach, and the fact that the word that you use, and I think you picked it up from what Elliot was also talking about, which is mutuality and ecosystems and networks. That is so much exemplified in what you do. So big fan of that. And frankly, that is the starting point for how Terra plays potentially a role in this as well. So maybe if I back out a little bit, my own story, personal story, was as one of the many individuals some years back looking at my skills and trying to figure out how I could use my skills in climate and sustainability focused work and not finding an answer. And over a period of time, as we've worked through this problem in the past couple of years, the big insight has been that the reason why there's a market failure in the first place is because you need this ecosystem centric approach from day one. You can't build just one piece of it and hope that the rest shall follow. And as you can imagine, for organizations that are just getting off the ground, that's not the easiest problem to solve on day one. And I think that is what we ended up bringing to the table, and what I think might be interesting in a regional context as well. So I tend to break down the problem in essentially three steps, and imagine now kind of that applied to both the textile employers and also potential new talent coming in, which is these three different segments are. One is that there is a discovery challenge. Now, the discovery challenge is what kind of roles exist out there in the first place that somebody going to a community college in North Carolina would potentially be interested in. And that's very hard to discover right now. But second also is that on the employer side, employers who are actually bringing those kind of sustainability thinking into their processes and their products find it very hard to get discovered by talent on the other side. So therefore, there is this discovery market failure that somebody needs to address. Second is now that you've discovered as an individual what those kind of roles might be, there's some place where you need to find out what kind of skills to acquire to be able to get there. And these skills are not individual atomic skills; they're often pathways, right? So you start somewhere and you have an end destination in mind, and you have to have something that looks like a credible step-by-step guide to go from here to there. And that's again something which is right now very scattered, not in one single place. And the third one is that if you solve for these two, you want individuals to be landing in jobs which have this high green quotient, as to speak Issua's language. But they have to not just land in those jobs; they have to come back as mentors, back into the ecosystem, going back to the discovery path all over again. And even though our ambition is to try to get 100 million people working in climate this decade, the journey of 100 million people starts with a few people to begin with. And we've always found that being able to concentrate that, root that in either a functional skill or a geography is actually the right way to get that whole ecosystem started in a mini small fashion. And so specifically the tools and strategies that Molly that you were talking about. So for example, in our case, we ended up building on the discovery side a lot of analysis on what kind of jobs exist out there and what kind of skills are embedded in them, which are potentially green in nature. So therefore, the discovery for all these different jobs, and we run these online job fairs that allow employers to come in and showcase the work that they are doing and to hire talent who might be interested in that. So that's one part of the discovery mechanism. On the skills acquisition, I think this is actually a bigger challenge, which is the kind of skills that we're talking about that make you successful in these roles. Some of them have a green component to them, but a lot of them have actually the traditional component of being successful in a role attached to them as well. And there you need local partnerships with skilling providers who are able to understand the local context. And that's the kind of thing that we would love to experiment in a regional geography, like the one that you're working in. And finally, the last part about jobs and mentorship. So we do run the world's largest climate, or one of the world's largest climate job boards, with about 50,000 jobs. But they are only as useful as an entry point. What you really need is a mentor network. So we have a few hundred mentors who are working in each of these different sectors that individuals have access to. They can set up a time with them and chat with them to understand what does it feel like a day in the life of a certain role. And that's the kind of thing that now imagine all of that contextualized in the case of a specific industry, in the case of a specific region, and you have what is, I think, TIC's one of the core missions, right, which is to have locally rooted wealth. This is wealth of both talent and financial wealth that starts to now circulate within the same economy. And that's the thing that we feel very excited about working on.